Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning. I have no idea actually where you're all based. My name is Elena. I work for IETM, International Network for Contemporary Performing Arts. I welcome you from Lyon. It's a very beautiful French city. I'm sitting here with Francisca, my colleague, and Teatro de Celestine, which is hosting our plenary meeting. More than 200 people came here to be with us in Lyon. It's definitely not the biggest IETM plenary meeting, but it's also maybe one of the warmest and long-awaited ones. But many of you, our friends, members, and partners could not be with us here for one very known big reason, but also for many other reasons. And that's why we decided to offer you a few digital sessions to all of you based in different places of the world, in order to connect, to exchange, to have this global reflection together, something that IETM has always been about, be it about a physical meeting or a digital session, of which we have hosted dozens in these particular times. So the topic of this panel, of this discussion today is live versus digital, the old new debate. Indeed, digital theater and performing arts and screen dance have been there for decades. Digital component in our sector has been growing and have been developing and flourishing for many years before the pandemic. But what happened in the last 1.5 years was absolutely unprecedented, because many professionals, many colleagues in our sector had to reinvent themselves and to jump into the internet, even if they never wanted to do so. And some of us in the sector said that this has been a great time to experiment, to try new things and to reach new audiences. Some others found it a very challenging period when digital was just a part of a survival strategy for them, which undermined the main artistic value of their work. So on one hand, we hear voices which say that the digital is the future, and others say that we need to go back to life as soon as possible and not undermine our main core component of our art form, its liveliness. So isn't it a good time to discuss this confusion, this, maybe we can say mess, this misunderstanding about digital versus live, live versus digital? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? All this sounds very strange, perhaps, for some of you. And to try to sort it all out, we have here wonderful 3 experts who have been working in the sector and experimenting with the digital for many years. John Ashford, Cinti Ionescu, and Karen Toftegard. I'm very happy that they agreed to be with us today in our digital room to talk about the digital. So, and let's say that it's enough for me to talk, and let's jump directly to John. John Ashford is a founder and director of Airwaves, European platform for research and presentation of contemporary dance companies, and also he's also a contemporary dance producer. Hello, John. You are not muted.
Hello.
That you could start. How are you?
I'm pretty well, but it's dark here. I'm sorry.
This is not a problem. It's dark here as well.
Okay.
So, John, tell us please a little bit. I'm very curious to hear about your experience with the digital tools in this dance sector, within maybe Airwaves or beyond, and especially in this last 1.5 years.
Yes, sure. I mean, in one sentence, what we do in Airwaves is to watch videos of dance in a meeting where there are 50 of us, and we'll be gathering next week in Eisenstadt in Austria. And from that and the reports of people who are actually in the room who have seen the works live, we select about 20 emerging artists from around 600 applications which come to us through digital means. And actually, we've been doing this for 25 years. And the result is that those 20 artists then offered performances around Europe. There are about 100 opportunities, and our partners select the ones from the 20 they like best. So that, in essence, is what we do. And 25 years ago, remember this, I brought a visual aid. VHS videotapes, analog. That's how we started. Fuzzy little feature, little figures in the distance dancing, and people having to talk in the room and explain what it was that was going on. And then, of course, very soon, yes, the DVD, hooray. that made a lot of difference, and it got better, and you began to be able to see detail in the dance. And so increasingly it was possible for us to understand what was going on, even if we didn't appreciate the work in the same way as we might do if we were actually in the theatre. So we've always been early adopters of new technology. And in 2014, we started live streaming from Umeå in Sweden. And we had a 3-camera live stream of all of the performances, all 20 of them at that time. And we kept on doing that for 4 years. And we had a reasonably good take-up of people watching these live performances until Facebook decided that they would live stream. And so suddenly, instead of somebody watching for 20 minutes on their laptop or on their desktop computer, they were watching for 3 minutes on this. And basically, Facebook killed live streaming for us. So when it came to COVID and what to do when live performances were no longer possible, we already brought quite a lot of experience, and we already had people working with us who could look at what was available. So in 2019, we had a festival which was supposed to be in Rijeka. Couldn't do it because of COVID, so he took the whole thing online, everything, including the social dimension. And I remember saying at the beginning of planning that over a 6-week period, we must have a single portal. And the team came up with something called Zoom, which nobody had really heard of. It was some kind of business thing. And one of our digital people said, I think there's a way I can use this to actually show the videos in good quality if I put it through these different filters. And it worked. So we had about 200 people over the weekend staying for 10 hours a day and accumulating in a bar afterwards in the foyer. So this was our first digital experience. The second one was a much less successful experiment, which was to ask our artists to make works for interactive live broadcast. And 8 of them did. And it was possible during the course of a very long evening to interact with the event which they had prepared. The third was to accelerate our experiments with VR, virtual reality. And the crucial thing here is that we're using VR not as an artistic means of expression, but as a way of documenting work. So we put a stereoscopic 180-degree camera in front of a performance and let it run. And then we assemble 25 people in a circle, give them all VR goggles, and simultaneously they watch that performance. And the big difference between that and watching a flat screen is that you can choose where to look. On a flat screen, it's the editor who chooses which detail you will look at in the dance, when you will pull back. But with 180-degree VR, you get reasonably good detail of the entire performance in front of you. You can decide whether to look at that solo over there or that duet over there. So this is something called Springback Ringside. And we have 12 works now in the catalogue. And as COVID begins to lift, we'll be recording more and more. And there are performances of this around Europe in Bassano del Grappa a couple of weeks ago, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week in London at the Place. And we are very interested in developing this as a form to present dance where it can't be presented live.
That sounds like a fantastic history and a story of experimenting with digital tools. But John, a few months ago or weeks ago, I don't remember, I heard you speaking on a panel. And some colleagues were sharing experiences of experimentation with different things, not digital, in dance sector. And I remember you said that experimentation is healthy and exciting, and that's what you said, dance will always be dance. So how does it relate to the discussion of how our topic tonight?
Okay, I have to put on my glasses for this because this requires me to reduce a 1-hour lecture to, I'll try and do it in 3 minutes. I worked in theatre in the first part of my life. And first of all, I worked at the Royal Court Theatre, which is doing text. And gradually I kind of moved my interest towards the visual representation on the stage. And so I ended up in dance. And what interests me about dance is something which is called kinesthetic empathy. It's a psychological term, kinesthetic response. And it's sort of, the easiest example of it perhaps is the so-called fight or flight syndrome. So if you're crossing a road and you see a car coming towards you very fast, you have a muscular reaction. Your sight tells you to brace your muscles and get out of the way, otherwise you're going to be killed. So this notion has been applied to dance. And the observation is that if you closely examine someone who watches live dance in a room, breathing the same air as the dancers and in the same space, there are small muscular movements in the watcher that mimic the dancer. And so this is what distinguishes dance from theatre or from any other art form, I think, because it's a primary communication of one body to another. And the communication is through movement and through the movement physically experienced in the watcher. So this is what I meant by dance will always be dance, because I think it's the first thing we do when we're a baby. I think we communicate with our parents through dance, actually. And I think it's probably the last thing we do, but I'm going to find out this out a bit later. I think we don't have words at the end. I think we have only movement if we're lucky. So in between, there's a very long stretch where we can dance and we can watch dance. And the interest I have in VR is simply this, that there is evidence that if you ask people to watch dance on a flat screen, they understand what's going on, but they don't get that visceral message in their body. They just sit there slumped. If you give them goggles, then it kind of recreates excitement of those first silent movies, you know, when the train came out of the screen into the auditorium and everyone jumped out the way. And I actually experienced this myself with a solo that we recorded in VR of a Czech artist who took some flowers, rather like those behind me actually, and shoves them in your face in the camera when you're watching in VR. And I knew this was going to happen, but when I saw it in my home here, I actually did that. I did actually duck out the way. This proved to me that we're on something, because it is different from the flat screen. Now, at the moment, it's really not quite good enough. The technical quality isn't really quite good enough, but Facebook have just announced that they are creating 10,000 jobs in the European Union in order to develop the metaverse, which is where augmented reality and virtual reality will become a part of the daily equipment of our everyday lives. So I think there'll be very rapid developments in this area. And I hope that we're going to be ahead of the curve again. And this will be a way in which we can watch evidence of dance, if not the real thing, in the future. I'll say just one other thing about it without taking up too much of your time, which is that I'm particularly interested in this idea of a ring of 25 people watching the same thing simultaneously, because it becomes a community experience. They form a secondary audience together with the first audience. And so it is a live experience, and we always follow it with a live question and answer with the artists who you've just been watching. And this can happen anywhere. It can happen, as Cynthia was saying earlier, in the smallest village in Romania. It doesn't need anything but a plug. And it can also happen in schools. It can happen in protected institutions like old people's homes, or even in prisons. So this can take dance to places which it wouldn't otherwise be able to go.
Sounds very exciting. Thank you so much, John. We will still come back to you. And now I'm very excited to go to Karen Toftegaard. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Elena. Thank you so much.
We can hear you very well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for joining us with your brilliant, as usual, brilliant background behind your back. Karen is a cultural...
This is a celebration to this ITM happening live in Lyon.
Yes, it's a 40th anniversary that we're celebrating here in Lyon. So Karen Toftegaard, who we are very happy to welcome here, is a cultural entrepreneur. She developed and co-founded festivals and an outdoor gallery. She is also managing director of PR company, and she works as an international producer at the Performing Arts Festival Copenhagen Stage. Karen, it's not the first time we're talking to you about the digital technologies, and I'm very happy to deepen that discussion. I remember we said once that we agree that digital performing arts is an art form in itself. It has its own right, and it's kind of counterproductive to constantly compare the live and the digital performing arts. But if it's an art form in itself, could you maybe try to highlight the main unique features of that art form, which is digital performing arts?
Yes, yes, I would like to try and do that. Thank you so much, Elena. Maybe I should add that we this spring I was also I was launching a digital theater festival where we actually did a lot of experimentation with digital first shows, and that they were all live, and just like John was noting, they were all having this community. Either they were one-on-one shows, so it was very intimate experience, or it was, we had another show where it was like only 30 audiences were allowed to be there, and then they were also, the audiences were shown there in these reflections, or like digitally, they were shown there as holograms. So there was this special technique in that, and that leads me to, when you ask about this regarding the intimacy, is, for example, when there is this interaction, there is something about an intimacy that unfolds, because in a way that's more, that maybe for some people could feel more safe than when it happens in real life, because here you are a little bit protected. Some people find it can be quite overwhelming, or like even crossing your boundaries when you experience immersive theater or interactive theater in real life. I'm not saying that's like that for all at all, but some people can feel that. But there is some kind of safety where you can actually connect with another person. But I think it's very much based on the art, or the way of the artworks are made. I think I found a particular interest in this, where you produce the works directly for a digital stage, and then making it live, and where you have the connection. There definitely there is an intimacy. But we also, both in the framing of Copenhagen Stage, the festival, where we did digital showcases and presented works that were we also actually tried to stream work that were pre-recorded. And so, I mean, we did, and the digital adaptations and so on. We also did the one-to-one, like putting up cameras and live streaming from a show happening on stage. And from my point of view, the ones that worked, where I could feel the digital intimacy, that was definitely where we had a connection with the audience. There was a connection between the artists and the audiences. For example, also at Copenhagen Stage in 2020, Recall Performance Group, they make this show where they send out glowing algae beforehand, so to all the people in the audiences. So when they sat at home and experienced the work, then they had their own private algae, glowing algae in some water. And there was something about that where you could show that. And then also, like, this simple thing that the artistic director, Tina Tapgaard, she took a glass of water, and she greeted us, and we were told that we should have a glass of water beforehand. Exactly, just like John's. Yes, so she greeted us, and then we all had this glass of water. And I think it was such a simple thing, but the fact that we actually got connected there was that, and I was so much closer. Just like now, we see each other so close. It's much closer than if I was sitting on the 11th row in a theater. I mean, it was, so there can be definitely some kind of intimacy which I didn't expect beforehand, actually. And then I would also just like to say that there are these many different ways of doing things and approaching the digital thing. But I think it's very important that we talk about coexistence here, that it's different expressions for different artists and producers and so on. So it's very much about also letting it grow how it grows. So I'm not into the verses. I'm just more into, let's see how the different people can actually make something grow out of what makes sense to them. and let's not try and limit any kind of any person's creativity in that sense, and just let's see what grows from this, and just also appreciate that we actually had a time here where we could try something out that we wouldn't otherwise have tried out. So opportunity, definitely.
Yes, that's I wouldn't doubt that you would say like that. I always feel this special energy that after you talk, I always want to go and watch some performing arts piece on the internet. Yeah, but let's maybe get a bit more pragmatic and practical. I think monetization, business model issue, it could be one of the reasons for many performing arts professionals not to engage with the digitalization of their works. Do you think it's ever possible to make a living out of digital performing arts? Do you have any opinion about possible business models in this domain?
It's still me. Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, I think, well, I'm not going to say that, okay, we can, for example, that I have earned a lot of money on it or anything, or found the perfect model. However, I had this discussion with a Spanish woman some weeks ago. She was visiting Denmark and talking about digital theater. And there she was actually explaining these, how the grand theaters, they could earn money on this, on these presentations, and also integrating it with, for example, also where in areas where the older people, they still wanted to go to the theaters, but they couldn't really go anymore because they didn't dare to go out and so on. So there is something about there are audiences that actually, or people are not going to travel as much as they did before, so they're going to see some shows. However, I also think that, for example, I would give one example here. I'm not saying that it's like earning a lot of money at the moment, but there is definitely, I see a potential in it. For example, I worked with this Belgian group called Untitled. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but they're incredibly cool and based in Ghent. And they did this work, TM, where they had like more than 20 co-producers. So they, instead of going out to a lot of funds, foundations, and applying for a lot of money, then they actually made this co-production by 20, where there were 20 co-producers, and then they present the work, this digital work. For example, it had premiered 6 places at the same time. And for example, yeah, in Helsinki, in Copenhagen, in the UK, in Netherlands, and Belgium, of course, and the fact that they were presenting their works with artists that were also in different time zones, because they were also later on, they were presenting it in different in outside of Europe. But then they had actually their performance, and in the lobby we could sit there and have the cosmopolitan experience. But there's a fact that they raised the money through their co-producers. So I think it's this definitely also something about thinking in another way, that maybe it's not necessarily funded by foundations, or maybe it's co-producing in another way, and the way there's no exclusivity rights or anything, that you actually, okay, just as how many, where does it make sense? How can you get your work out there touring? By co-presenting it. So it's very much about co-producing, co-presenting, like make me more seeing it as a collective, and then you can create works that can unfold. But again, I don't have the like a golden key or anything. But I would say that a point for me at the beginning was very important, was I thought it was when we did this digital first performances, was to present them and people had to pay for them. Because it was very, at that moment, it was this idea or this feeling that, okay, digital theater is just crap. It's not really worthy of, and they were kind of, the general opinion was more like people were downsizing it, and for me it was very important to really state that there are some artistic qualities in this, and of course we should not discount the product and or discount the experience. So we actually insisted on selling the tickets. And I remember this presenter in Denmark who said, "Oh, really? This is way too expensive." And of course, I was extremely happy when we sold out. So it was, and it was tough. However, again, when the first reviews came and people experienced, okay, this is actually great quality. Okay, and then they want to pay for it. So it's also, I think, the final word is, I think that the key to the money solution or the business model is to actually keep on believing in your project and believing in the value of the art experience and believing that you can actually bring something of great value to people when they sit at home, so they don't have to go out if they don't like to, and then they can go out on some other nights and do what they want to do there. But it's very much believing in your work and that it's worthy of being paid for.
Thank you so much, Karen. I think the main takeaway is that whatever we do should be driven by the artistic values and not by any kind of other external factor. And we will still come back to you as well. Now I'm very happy to welcome Cinti Ionescu. Cinti is a video designer and a Bucharest-based artist, working a lot with the digital tools. Welcome, Cinti.
Hello.
Everything, how are you doing?
Great.
Very nice combination of colors we see on the screen. So yeah, let's get to the serious topics. If we try to think, what is the main value of live art? I would say the main value of live art is this kind of ability to bring a person in a here and now situation, in a place where people can actually be in a moment and to share emotion, time, and space. So if we say that the digital performing arts is the future or has a future, how could it then that this art form fulfill this main value?
So what I think is, I'll take from Karen's two ideas that I liked, this of opportunity and that one of believing in your work. And what I'd like to say is that maybe we're a bit mistaken sometimes into talking these days about digitalisation just for what we've seen in the past year and a half. And I believe a lot of artists put work in using technology on stage and in live events. And that was not always seen. I think like nowadays it's a hype because suddenly we needed some solutions when we didn't have the stage. And I'll give you an example. For instance, 5 years ago, I documented and produced my own show about depression, and I used augmented reality. And I used augmented reality on a scene where I wanted to depict the depression, and then this dialogue in between a teenager, which was the actor, and the depression. And I thought about it a long time as a video designer. That's my job. I work with it. And I thought about the aesthetics. How can I do this so it doesn't look pathetic, you know? So it looks sleek and nice, and like somehow that you feel it and it's not just marked. And finally, I ended up with this technical solution of the augmented reality, because then, like, even for people that don't understand the technology, that was easy to understand it. It was on stage. People were in a venue, but then they would see the actor, and then behind him, projected on the stage, was this point cloud. And then the actor was interacting with the point cloud, which was marked in the physical space somewhere in front of him on the stage. But then instantly people started understanding, even older people, they really didn't know what was that or how that was done, but they completely understood the point. And that was 5 years ago. And in Romania, there was no way at the time to find a theater that would understand that, because unfortunately in Romania, even though we have a great internet network infrastructure and amazing IT professionals, they all are in the private sector. So like everyone migrated from the public sector to the private sector. In the public sector, in anything you might say, digitalization is only on paper. And that includes also the cultural sector, where we, I think, are a bit behind than the private one. So people start producing their own work, and then maybe you end up, like I did, performing it at the Contemporary Art Museum. But then also that was considered a bit like of an avant-garde. That's considered a bit like this is not really theater. And I kind of mind that, because it's already technology that exists out there. Everyone already heard of Pokemon, right? That's also augmented reality. So it's not so avant-garde, it's not so out of reach. It's happening in everyday life. And I honestly believe that we should employ, or we should be able to be open at the idea that we should start experimenting and employing these tools when it comes to the stage where we can all be in the same physical space, but it might be a better solution to use a certain type of technology for us together to experience something, to go through a feeling. And also this, I think, opens new possibilities when you are forced, like we were during the pandemic, to stream something, because then you come up with a bit of different solution than just presenting a recorded theater play, which was not thought for being streamed. And so like I really believe somehow in trying to make a difference in between. So I don't think you can show just anything on a screen. I think at the moment we choose to do that, we need to especially prepare for that, to do work for that. So I feel like, especially in performative arts, we always think of the setting and of the audience. While like as a painter, you do whatever you feel in the moment. I think in performative arts, we are always aware of having an audience, and where is that audience? How is our space looking? And I think that's how we build, and that's how we produce. And I think that should remain the same. It's just that employing new tools or technology or digitalizing certain things is just part of life. It's just part of everyday life, and we need to remain connected to that. Otherwise we disconnect with our audiences, and then we have no purpose as creators.
Mm-hmm. You touched already about that, but I would like maybe to deepen that. We say that digital art doesn't have borders because the internet is so borderless. But I guess there are big gaps between countries in terms of infrastructure or equipment, access to online tools, and also accessible funding for these experiments. Maybe could you tell us a little bit, and you already started maybe to deepen that, what is the situation in Romania in this regard?
In Romania, the infrastructure is, as I was saying, super good. I think internet speed is one of the best in Europe, and it's been like that for a long time. We had internet in here again, but that's also interesting. That's why I think we have a good infrastructure. It's because it was not started within a system. It was started by these neighborhood networks that would work, and then you would call the guy and, please, can I just connect to your network. So then only after that, the big companies appeared on the market. So when they wanted customers, they had to offer at least the same speeds at a very low price. So that's why internet remained, I think it's the only working infrastructure, to be honest, in my opinion, in Romania. So we're doing great with that. Everyone has internet, but not everyone is connected to the internet, even though, like, you look at the statistics and there are a lot of people spending 7 hours online. Well, it's also interesting how they spend those 7 hours, because again, like if it's Facebook, then this doesn't allow too much space for other directions. And I think that's where we should step in, us in the cultural sector, and somehow stop hiding behind the velvet curtains, which I feel is still happening in Romania, and trying to go towards our audiences. And I really believe the internet and this moment of the pandemic was a good one, because certain people that wouldn't necessarily go to the theater, they would though try to figure out, okay, what's this performance thing like, and so on. So I think it was a good moment. But then again, out of what I've seen, for instance, the public institutions were not ready for that. And yeah, I mean, like, they would show recordings of their shows, but not necessarily anything produced by their ensembles, and produced especially for this tool, no? Because that Zoom or whatever was a tool. And the first experiments or the first shows online, I also worked on some. I did something on Zoom. I did something even on WhatsApp. All these tryouts came mostly from independent artists. So that's pretty much the situation. And I feel we need a stage for experiment, a space. And I feel, and I'm going to go back to Karen and agree with what she said earlier about co-producing, because, like, yes, you need to come together and find the ways, and then, yeah, try to push for it and go alternative spaces, because now the internet also offers new possibilities. Otherwise, you cannot be stuck hoping that the public sector is going to encourage the experiment or the research, because this is not happening.
Okay, well, maybe from that we can go directly to my next question to all of you. I was wondering if you would have to formulate one most important recommendation for policymakers and funders who are interested in supporting digital performing arts. What would be that recommendation? I didn't hear you for a moment. My question was, if each of you, and it's a question for each of you, you would have to formulate one policy recommendation for funders and policymakers who are interested in supporting digital performing arts, what would be that one most important policy recommendation? And I don't know, maybe we can ask John now, if he has ideas.
You're muted, John.
We don't hear you.
I didn't want to get in your way. I'm unmuted. The first thing which comes to my mind, and I think probably is the simplest and most important one, is it's not cheap. Because I think quite often it's assumed that it's possible to make digital content just with your phone, because people can do that and they can upload it to TikTok and it doesn't cost anything. But it's not like that. Everything costs money if you're going to do it properly. And I was interested in the discussion about how you monetize this, how you put a value on it. And someone in the chat said, you know, that people will pay, for instance, for live streams or even recordings from the National Theatre here in the UK. And indeed, I live only half an hour's walk away from the Almeida Theatre. And actually, it's a small theatre with a very good stars on stage. And it's very expensive to go. And I'm quite happy sitting here watching on a very large OLED screen a 12-camera shoot of a live performance only half an hour's walk away from me. And if it costs me €15, then that's a hell of a lot cheaper than going, and I feel okay about it. So I think that you can do that. And just coming back to our own little enterprise, Spring Back Ringside, we are actually now beginning to charge proper prices for it. So if you go to a theatre, these 25 people, not a lot of people, but we can do it 2 or 3 times in a day. We are currently asking here in London €12 and €10 concessions. So I'm an OAP, I get in for €10. And we're asking the people who come in the first few days of next week to evaluate their experience and to say quite simply, was it worth it? And I hope they'll say yes. And I think there's something about actually going out which makes it easier to charge for it when you're actually sitting in a circle of people. If you're sitting at home, it's more difficult. So what you have to do is to align it with Netflix, because everyone will pay for Netflix. So you've got to produce product which is comparable to what you'll get from a subscription service. And that's why I come back to my point, which is what I would recommend is to funders, not cheap. You've got to back people who are going to do this properly. Otherwise, it won't represent the art adequately. There's just that I'll leave it there. Yeah. Oh no, I won't leave it there because I have to say it because nobody else has. I would also ask them to assess to what extent the ecological dimension of the digital presentation has been taken into account. And I think that question has to be asked about every single project which is under application to anybody at the moment. And obviously, there are many digital devices which are going to limit aviation. And that's one reason why I'm particularly interested in our Springback Ringside project, because at the moment, one person travels in an electric car. That's it. So you can present a work with 6 dancers, but only one person travels.
Thank you, John. That's very viable, sensible, policy recommendations. Karen, what would you recommend to the funders?
Yeah, as now when you ask about the funders, I'm going to refer to some, and maybe that is something that is very particular in Denmark or in the Nordic countries, but at least in Denmark, we have this theater law, and this digital theater is not acknowledged as a theater. And that means that it's actually somehow falling between some chairs. So it's not really recognized as video, which it isn't, and it's not recognized as theater. So there is something about the perception and the recognition or the acknowledgement of this as an artistic expression, and instead of I mean, we have actually, I think that in Denmark, when I compare Denmark and Sweden, for example, I know I've been speaking with several Swedes from Sweden who have, there hasn't been the same recognition there, but it's also growing there. But in Denmark, we actually had the national prize. They actually invented a digital theater prize this year, and so there was a nomination there and an award. And the Danish Arts Foundation, they actually also made this fund or this particular effort where you could apply for funding for a digital project. So I want to say that there's definitely a lot of recognition there. However, if you really look into the law or the definitions of it, then the digital theater or the digital dimensions of theater is not acknowledged. So I think there should be something there, because I mean, it's all in the structures. So when you start acknowledging it on a deeper level or in the structural level, then it gets recognized also by the founders. But I think that. I think that would, and I just want to also appreciate the thing that John said about the sustainability aspect in it. There's definitely something, and also in that, also being open to the fact that we maybe also should challenge some of the mainstream online platforms. So in order to also get out, so in some of the funding, maybe also recognize and support the ones who tries to explore. Not Facebook, not so that we get a what's it called, that there is a multiplicity or a different, diverse, that's the name I'm looking for, diverse expression or diverse use of tools also, so that we don't necessarily do a monopolization of different digital platforms in our way of exploring, of unfolding this this theater, because I really see it very much as a digital stage, where we are gonna find out different ways, but really the diversity in the digital tools, and who's behind those digital those different technologies, who are behind them, and then also having an awareness about that, just as we're having an awareness about the sustainability when it comes to environment. But because there is definitely something about what kind of structures in different levels do we support.
Great. I'm writing down. This is all very important things that you are saying. Cindy, what would be your recommendation?
My recommendation for a policy in Romania would be around the public sector, especially because Romania has many theaters around the country. So I would somehow enforce a policy that specifies a percentage out of the yearly budget of a theater that should must go to experiment. And when I'm talking about experiment, I don't necessarily only mean, for instance, multimedia technology or digitalization, but as well finding new forms of expression and aesthetics. And I would, that would be my policy, because it's much easier when you're looking like, whatever money there is, but let's find a percentage and establish that a percentage out of that goes to research and like trying to find new forms. So like we keep on reinventing ourselves. Otherwise, otherwise would be sad.
Thank you. I think we had a couple of reactions in the chat, and there was one question from Rodrigo Arenas. I'm just going to read it, and whoever of you wants to answer it, please just go ahead. What's your vision, opinion about exploring online media as more than a mere medium, a register, but going beyond and considering them as habitats for performance artworks?
Well, I think John already said about the VR goggles, and I found that interesting. Me, for instance, I said about using augmented reality on live stage, and as well I am interested in experimenting. For instance, I as well worked in an immersive cube with 360 video, where you as an audience are immersed into the environment together with the performer. So I think like there are several ways, there are a lot of ways, and I think in some senses it's interesting that this digital theater conversation is very much related to how we evolve in general, like what's our conversation with these tools and with these means in general. Is not, it can be on the stage in everyday life or in, so I think, I am very interested, and I do research in that side, and I believe like also my colleagues, sorry, I jumped in.
That's very good. Karen or John, do you have any opinions?
I think I would just say very briefly that I very much believe in that this is simply a digital stage, and just like we've used the city as a stage, or the private space, the apartments, and so on. Whatever we have experienced or explored throughout the years and used as a stage for the theater, I simply just see this as these different online tools and these different online platforms as a new stage that we are entering now.
Yes. I think that actually the word digital is becoming pretty useless, because we're talking about very distinct forms which are beginning to emerge now, partly accelerated by the pandemic. And so I personally see quite a large divide between the flat screen domestic experience, where the creators of a work cannot control the means under which it is viewed, and the live experience of entering a virtual reality space together with others and interacting with them. And I know that there are a number of choreographers, AE here in the UK and Istok Kovac in Slovenia, for instance, who are using the virtual space as a creative playground. And I think that's a very different thing from, for instance, what we tried to do with Airwaves during the lockdown, which was to get artists to make work in their living rooms, which was interactive with an online audience in real time. These are really very different experiences. And so I think that the word digital is beginning to be a lid that we have to lift to see the many different possibilities within. I think, does that answer your question, Elena? I've kind of forgotten your original question. Oh no, the question was, yeah, I'm sorry, it's a question from Rodrigo, wasn't it? Which is, can we imagine it to be a creative space, basically? And I think, of course, the answer has to be yes, because any space is a creative space. But I would draw this really kind of fundamental distinction about to what extent you can capture the attention of the viewer in a domestic circumstance. I think that's really something which we need to think about quite carefully.
Thank you. If there is still any question from participants, please drop it in the chat and we will try to answer it. We still have 7 minutes to go. And in the meantime, I will try to sum up. I think we had a very insightful and actually quite dynamic discussion. The takeaways, I think, from our discussion maybe are not necessarily groundbreaking, but it's very important to repeat again that we should not try to compare, and we should be nuanced and we should be fair when we talk about digital. And we also should, digitalization has to happen in line with artistic needs and with artistic values, and preferably not out of necessity or as a solution in a crisis time like now. So very good recommendation that you have put forward. It's expensive, so it should be respected, the needs, financial needs. It's important to measure ecological footprint and not perhaps to go overexcited about replacing life by digital because it is supposedly greener. It's important to achieve certain level of recognition and acknowledgement of the art form also in a structured level, as what Karen said. We need to be aware when we do that, and not only about our ecological footprint, but also about maybe ethical part of the story, and also to whom we give our works, to which platforms, who are behind those platforms, which values and ethics are behind those platforms. There should be sufficient funding for experiments. That's probably the whole sector would agree, be it about digital or not. I like the words of Karen that the digital is the new stage. And I also like the words of John, the word digital becomes useless. So I think our next session, I really think that discussion is to be continued. And we will really try to make a step forward and not use the word digital, we'll try. And also about the fundamental difference about John was talking, I think it's also very important to highlight it. So yeah, okay, we got a question. I was just ready to leave the meeting. Of course, I would first say goodbye, but don't we have to make a bigger difference between theater using digital tools on stage and digital theater which uses digital platforms? That's a question from Chris Ziegler. I think we can all unmute ourselves and say yes together.
Yes, but also on the other hand, I feel like you need to understand those tools. And for instance, for people that understood those those tools when it was needed, for instance, to show stuff online, it was just easier. That's the only thing, and that this also gets the audiences readier and more at ease with that. That's my point when I was saying that somehow, we could bring those close to each other, even though we're talking different forms. But just what I was saying was that we're talking performances, and we need to be aware how our performance is shown. It can be shown on a stage or it can be shown online. And I think it should be created, especially with that objective in mind, with that finality. And like from this point of view, I think the working process, it's not very different somehow, or like the creative way of working with technology. That's my take.
There is another question.
About copyright.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about
we don't
copyright?
really have time to address it, but I think it's a very important one. And actually, although I'm not often excited by administration, working out with artists how they should be paid to record their work in VR and what they should receive each time it's shown to an audience has been very interesting. And I think we've come to fair agreements with the artists who we have recorded so far. But there's no precedent to this. And I think that it will increasingly be the case that we must safeguard artists against exploitation.
Yeah, this is indeed a very important and big topic, which probably we would have to address next time, together with privacy, maybe also ethics, and also about indeed these platforms that Karen was talking about, because not in every country those platforms we're using are accessible or available. Maybe about accessibility, about disability, not everyone is able to follow things online. I think the next question that we would ask in our next session, which I'm already planning as we speak, would be who is excluded, who is not part of this experience, and how to make them be part of it. I think we are ready to close the session. I'm extremely grateful to Cinti, John, and Karen. Thank you so much for joining us. I think it was a very nice discussion. At least I think I learned a lot. And for all those in the room, I would like to thank you too. It's a pity that you're not here in Lyon with us and cannot go and have a drink. That's something I will try to do now. And to celebrate the 40th anniversary of IETM. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Local time, there will be another session about translocality. Please try to join and be with us there as well. Thank you all. I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.